You know, if it had been available, I genuinely think I would have put lickable wallpaper in at least one room in my house. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the 1971 musical fantasy, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content, like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory stars Gene Wilder, Peter Ostrum, and Jack Albertson, and was directed by Mel Stuart. Based on Roald Dahl's 1964 novel, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, it tells the story of a poor child who wins the chance to tour Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. It's not often that a film manages to be both heartwarming and unhinged at the same time. Whimsical and terrifying. A child's fantasy and an adult's cynical reality. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is all of these things and more, blended together into a dark, sugary confection that never quite tastes as overwhelmingly sweet as you expect it to. This film is so popular and well-known, but it's never lost that weird, quirky, cult favorite feeling, no matter how embedded in pop culture it's become. This story originated in the mind of classic children's author Roald Dahl, and he was very displeased with the changes made to it, and actually disowned the film. However, like Kubrick's author-hated changes to The Shining, the changes made here resulted in a better cinematic version of the story than if the book had been more faithfully adapted. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is the ultimate childhood fantasy, put in movie form. And when viewed from that perspective, there's this simplistic purity to it all. It's every kid's dream to be one of 5 people in the whole world to win a contest, to spend the day in a magical chocolate factory, and get a lifetime supply of chocolate. It doesn't get any more kid innocent than that. It's a movie that romanticizes the neighborhood candy store and turns it into this after-school playground that has a fantastical and mysterious chocolate factory to explore. It's a movie and premise that's filled with childlike wonder and amazement. You can see it in the kids' faces, but you can also feel it as an audience member too. That first glimpse of the chocolate room is just like Dorothy opening the door to Oz. It was amazing to watch as a kid, but even as an adult, I find myself fantasizing about which candy I would eat first, which fruit I'd want to try on the lickable wallpaper. This factory, with all its weird and wild things, these fantastical inventions and contraptions, the memorable music, the unforgettable sound of the everlasting gobstopper machine. It's a movie of impossibilities, but the allure of pure imagination is undeniable. Add to that the heartfelt underdog story of Charlie Bucket, and you've got something so sweet and charming, you'd think Wonka himself created it. When thinking back on Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, that feel-good magic and fantastical whimsy is probably what immediately comes to mind. But this movie is such an odd blend, because in addition to that childhood wonder, it's so dark. There's this whole other level just barely under the surface, bubbling up like a persistent vermicious knid. Some scenes are creepy, like the ominous tinker outside the gates, or the run-in with Slugworth in the tunnel. Some are intense and unsettling, like the fizzy lifting drink sequence that almost brings the film to a messy and sudden end. But other scenes are downright scary. The psychedelic horror of the tunnel sequence on Wonka's boat, the Wonkatania. That nightmare-inducing combination of color, sound, and images. Bugs crawling across faces. A chicken beheaded with an axe. How is that possibly in the same movie where kids were just eating giant gummy bears off of a tree? But even beyond the blatantly creepy scenes, there's a slightly sinister undercurrent to the film, as kids get picked off one by one in more than potentially fatal ways. We never do see any of those other kids again, and the dark ambiguity of that is both entertaining and unsettling. Speaking of the kids, this film has got quite the cast of characters, each strangely memorable for their own unique reasons, no matter how small the role. I could talk about each of these characters at length, but to keep this review at a semi-reasonable length, I'll spend my time talking about the Candyman himself, Mr. Willy Wonka. The novel this film is based on is called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and as you'd probably expect, Charlie was the main focus. Charlie's still an important part of this film adaptation, but much of the focus here shifts to Willy Wonka himself, hence the name change for the film. Unlike the other films in the franchise, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory doesn't spend any time digging into the details of Wonka's past or upbringing. He's a mysterious enigma, a showman, but a bit of a hermit, having only had Oompa Loompas to keep him company for years. Much like the film as a whole, there's a sense of ambiguous dichotomy with Wonka. He's pleasant, but very bizarre and sardonic, and we never quite know what his true intentions are. In fact, our introduction to Wonka immediately plants the seeds of doubt about him. His cane trick is a fun and silly moment, but it also makes us question the reality of what we see and hear from him for the remainder of the film. Wonka's iconic cane fake-out was actually suggested by Gene Wilder himself, not only because of the comedy, but also because of the ambiguity he wanted to bring to the character. His casting was a stroke of genius, and he was able to truly embody the unusual, multifaceted qualities of the character. He's friendly and inviting, but also a little creepy. A whimsical guy who likes to sing and owns a chocolate waterfall, but also the kind of man who would design a terror tunnel for his chocolate river to run through. The energetic physicality Wilder brought to the role was great, but I think it's the line delivery where he truly shines. It never feels forced, but always has a bit of a difficult-to-read duality in it. His nonchalance as kids start to get picked off, the sarcasm that drips from his "stop, don't" warnings. Wonka is a tough character to personify. There's a very weird balance to strike between light and dark, but Gene Wilder managed to do it perfectly. And even with the other films now in the franchise, I still can't imagine anyone else in the role. The characters and tone of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory are a big part of what makes this film enjoyable and memorable, but we can't forget about the plot. The core story is fairly linear and simple enough to follow, but it's easy to forget just how random this movie gets. So many sequences play out like unrelated vignettes that somebody just wanted to see on screen. Some seemingly random scenes, like the fizzy lifting drink sequence, have genuine relevancy to the plot, and others offer up an assortment of moral lessons, usually conveyed musically by Oompa Loompas, but this film's just full of bizarre and insane things. To be completely honest, if I was watching this movie for the first time now, this chaotic randomness would probably bother me. But after many rewatches, and a good deal of nostalgic bias, I've come to realize it's a big part of the film's charm. Some of the smallest, most random things are among my favorite parts of the movie. Mike TV's mom incorrectly identifying the musical lock as Rachmaninoff. The German news reporter standing in front of the perfectly positioned antlers, the multitude of ridiculous scenarios during the Wonka Mania sequence, even something as simple as a sentient hand coat hook grabbing Grandpa Joe's hat off his head. It's all these little oddities that make me look forward to rewatches of this movie the most. As a kid, I always liked Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. The amazing factory, the music, the dark humor that I probably didn't fully understand but was surely drawn to. I liked the movie, but as an adult, I truly loved the movie. The slow start and 45-minute build-up to actually going inside the factory no longer bother me like they used to. I can't help but sing along with even my least favorite song in the movie. The sinister whimsy and bizarre mixture of feel-good weirdness connect with me even more than they ever did when I was young. Now, I fully admit that nostalgia is an influencing factor here. I know that if I were seeing the movie for the first time today, I'd be picking it apart a whole lot more. I'm sure my rating would probably be a full paw lower, and I just wouldn't get the movie. But I've seen this movie probably 50 times, at least, and I do get it. It's definitely a film made with kids in mind, but it's one that's just as enjoyable, if not more so, for an adult. I've grown up with this movie, so I've seen my own perception and perspective of it shift from a simple kid's fantasy to something much broader and deeper. There are layers beneath this film's sweet candy coating, and it's those layers that make it endlessly satisfying, and dare I say, scrumdiddlyumptious. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number one is definitely Gene Wilder and his portrayal of Willy Wonka. Wonka is such a bizarre character. He's this walking oxymoron, a whimsical and endlessly creative chocolatier who sings his way through his days, but also an incredibly dark and sardonic character who has very little faith in people. The dichotomy present here should make him an almost impossible character to portray, with at least one of those two sides feeling forced or inauthentic, but somehow Wilder pulls it off. He's funny and charming and forces you to open yourself up to imagination and wonder, but there's this other thing underneath all of it. this darkness. Sometimes it's playful, sometimes it's apathetic, and sometimes it's borderline sinister, but it's there as this other dimension to the character, and just something that I can't imagine anybody else being able to do in quite the same way. It's no wonder the focus was shifted from Charlie to Willy Wonka in this film adaptation. The second pro is related to the first and is the tone. Just like with the character of Willy Wonka, the tone of the overall film is such an interesting and weird mix, and one that's just always worked for me. On one hand, this is a whimsical fantasy musical about childlike wonder and imagination and dreams. I mean, it's about winning a contest to tour a chocolate factory and get a lifetime supply of chocolate. It doesn't get much more innocent kid fantasy than that. But the light-dark dichotomy that we saw with the character of Wonka is seen here too. So on the other hand, there's creepy corporate espionage and unsettling moments sprinkled throughout as kids disappear in pretty severe ways, never to be seen again. Throw in a giant fan and a nightmare-inducing boat ride, and you've got some very intense and scary stuff for what seems like should be a kids' movie. Again, the tonal blend has no business working, but somehow it does, as dark weirdness constantly simmers underneath the whimsical top layer. Pro number 3 is the music. I mean, this is a musical after all, and what kind of musical is successful without some great songs? Everything here is just so memorable, and once again, that bizarre tonal blend is highlighted. We've got catchy, upbeat songs like The Candyman and I've Got a Golden Ticket that capture the magic and excitement of the story, the slightly downbeat Cheer Up Charlie that gets at the emotional heart of the film, songs that are downright unsettling like the Wonkatania, or ones that blend dark humor into the mix like I Want It Now or any of the Oompa Loompa songs. And then, of course, we've got the iconic Pure Imagination that manages to blend fantastical wonder with an eerie sense of poignancy. On the con side, my only issues are really just minor nitpicks. The film gets off to a bit of a slow start. I mean, we don't even see Willy Wonka until almost 45 minutes into the movie. I'll admit that as a kid, I used to get a little antsy early on in the film. I wanted to get inside the factory, so all the Charlie home life stuff was kind of to me. But I will say that as an adult, the slow start doesn't bother me nearly as much. All the sad Charlie stuff does still drag some, but I love the Wonka Mania sequence, which is loaded with jokes and scenarios that just completely went over my head as a kid. On the flip side, something that never stood out to me as a negative when I was young, but kinda does now, is the stylized on-screen text during some of the Oompa Loompa songs, especially their first one. It's not horrible or anything, but it kind of pulls you out of the film and makes you aware that you're watching a movie rather than experiencing it all firsthand as an additional person on the factory tour. Before I give you my rating recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them, if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory 4.5 out of 5 paws. It's got some minor pacing issues during the first act, but this film's memorable music, iconic characters, and unusual tonal blend make it an experience that's enjoyable and captivating at all stages of life. I'll fully admit that I've got quite a bit of nostalgia for this movie, which probably pushes my rating a bit higher than it would be if I had watched this first as an adult, but this is easily my favorite non-animated musical. I would recommend Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory to people looking for an unusual, mostly family-friendly fantasy film. Really, this is one of those movies that I think everybody should watch at some point in their life. And not just because I like it so much, but because of all that it has to offer. The music, the heart and messages, the fantastic performance by Gene Wilder. It's a kids' movie, but also one that's got a lot of stuff for adults to enjoy. It's a whimsical fantasy about a chocolate factory, but also a darkly funny social commentary. It's a musical, but one that has a story that feels reasonable as a musical, so it works even for somebody who isn't the biggest musical fan. It's this really weird mix, but it's also something that, I think rightfully, has become an iconic part of pop culture. If you liked Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, I would recommend The Wizard of Oz. This is another iconic musical featuring a young protagonist who's awestruck when she enters a colorful new world. This movie has some similarly memorable music, features some pretty dark and intense sequences, and blends reality and fantasy in a really creative way. If you liked the weird mix of whimsy and darkness, you might want to check out The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T. The only feature film ever written by Dr. Seuss, this bizarre musical fantasy focuses on a young boy who dreams that he's trapped in a music institute run by a madman. It's a chaotic, creepy, and exceptionally weird film that'll constantly have you thinking, wait, this is a kid's movie? If you'd prefer to back off the weirdness in favor of a slightly more traditional musical fantasy, you'll want to watch Mary Poppins. It's another variation on a kids' fantasy type story, and boasts a set of catchy songs, an excellent lead performance, and a heartfelt story with strong takeaway messages. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite live-action musical? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainely Movies, the way life should be.